All right, let's jump straight into this explainer. Today, we're exploring the absolute climax of Badil Zaman Said Nursi's 1922 Treatise on Nature. And what we're going to see is honestly fascinating. We are going to look at how a century-old philosophical and theological text perfectly, and I mean perfectly, maps onto modern cosmic and biological discoveries. It is incredibly rare to find a document that speaks so precisely to scientific realities that wouldn't even be uncovered for decades, but that is exactly what we have in front of us today.
So here's our roadmap for our exploration today. We'll start with the four logical doors, move into 1922 meets modern science, then scale up to the James Webb evidence, zoom back in for what is nature, and wrap up with the final call.
Okay, Section 1. The four logical doors. Proof by elimination. Let's see how the author builds his case, starting with the core methodology of the entire text, which is eliminative reasoning.
Now, this analogy is brilliant because it perfectly grounds Nursi's abstract theological concepts into something we can all visualize. Picture yourself standing in a room, and there are exactly four doors. If you can logically eliminate three impossibilities, like you literally go test three doors and find they are completely bolted shut, you actually don't need a shred of additional evidence for that fourth door. The remaining option isn't just a hunch or a belief. It is a strict logical necessity. The only open door is necessarily the exit.
So Nursi takes this exact logic and systematically locks the doors of materialism. He looks at four possible paths for how anything comes into existence. Path 1 claims that blind physical causes created things. Path 2 says matter somehow created itself. And Path 3 claims that nature just made it. But Nursi uses these really vivid analogies, like a perfectly measured pharmacy, a complex fly, or a magnificent palace, to show that blind causes, self-creation, and a passive nature are all logically impossible. They just cannot account for the sheer order we see in the world. So by locking those three doors, he proves the fourth. The way of divine unity, or creation by God, is the only open door left. It literally becomes a necessity.
Moving right along to Section 2, 1922 meets modern science, a century of foresight. Now, what's really wild is how we can take Nursi's 1922 claims and put them directly side by side with hard data from modern astrophysics and biology.
Just think about this timeline gap for a second. Back in 1922, Nursi argued that without a single creator, you'd basically have to attribute infinite consciousness and knowledge to every single atom, just so it would know where to go and what to do. Fast forward decades later, quantum mechanics matures, and physicists like Bohr and Heisenberg show that matter is actually undefined without an observer. Consciousness is foundational to reality itself. Nursi anticipated this exact philosophical necessity perfectly, way ahead of the curve.
And then we hit another massive parallel when it comes to the laws of nature. Nursi insisted that nature is merely a set of laws, not a power in and of itself, and modern physics completely backs this up. Natural laws, think gravity or thermodynamics, they're just descriptive. They describe what happens, but they absolutely do not possess the creative power to bring themselves into existence or to enforce themselves. They are the rules, not the ruler. Over the last century, science has essentially been beating a steady drum toward this exact idea of intentional design. Just look at the progression here. In 1948, Claude Shannon established that information doesn't just spontaneously arise from purely physical processes. By 1970, Hawking and Penrose proved the universe had a definitive beginning, creation from literally nothing. In 1996, Michael Behe demonstrated that microbiology contains irreducible complexity that chance simply cannot explain. And then in 2022, the James Webb Space Telescope opened up unprecedented views into early cosmology.
Which perfectly sets up Section 3, the James Webb evidence, order at the beginning of time. Let's scale things up to the cosmos and look at the ultimate modern parallel to Nursi's design argument.
When the James Webb Telescope peered 13.5 billion light-years back in time, imaging galaxies just 300 to 400 million years after the Big Bang, it totally shocked the scientific community. The earliest galaxies were way larger, vastly more ordered, and far more structured than random blind processes would ever predict. Webb's chief scientist, Nobel laureate John Mather, even noted that this early cosmic order continually surprises us. And you know what? It echoes exactly what Nursi claimed back in 1922, that from tiny atoms to massive planets, all of existence points directly to a glorious maker. Order isn't some random accident, it is the foundation.
And that brings us to a really major concept known as the anthropic principle. Scientists have observed that there are these fundamental constants in physics, just 6 core numbers that govern things like gravity and electromagnetism, and they are adjusted with mind-boggling precision. I mean, if any of these numbers were altered by even a fraction of a fraction, life simply could not exist. The universe behaves as if it was quite literally calibrated, just waiting for us to arrive.
So science basically leaves us with 2 positions to explain all this incredible fine-tuning. Position 1 is the multiverse, the idea that infinite parallel universes exist, and we just got incredibly lucky to live in the one that supports life. But as the source text points out, unless you're living in a sci-fi movie, this is a completely unobservable and untestable belief system. It's not strict science. Position 2 is the design argument, that the single universe was consciously designed for life. And this aligns flawlessly with Tawhid, or divine unity, which Nursi championed over a century ago as the only logically sound conclusion.
Moving into Section 4, what is nature? Redefining reality. So, having looked at the massive macrocosmos, let's zoom back into a really deep philosophical question. If nature didn't create all this, how does this text finally define what nature actually is? I absolutely love the rhythm and clarity Nursi uses here. He fires off these rapid contrasting statements to summarize his entire treatise, completely stripping nature of its creative power and reframing it for the reader. Nature is a work of art, but it is not the artist. It's a pattern, but not the designer. A set of laws, not the lawgiver. A created veil, a passive disposition, a surface. By defining nature simply as a beautiful, passive canvas, everything just snaps into logical place.
And finally, Section 5, the final call, the materialist's conversion. This brings us to the resolution of our explainer, where the source text recounts a dramatic, undeniable shift in perspective. The treatise wraps up with this incredibly powerful literary moment, a former materialist conceding to the arguments. Faced with such immense logical and physical evidence, this character realizes that denying intentional design is exactly like denying the sun and the light of day. The evidence is simply that clear, that precise, and that powerful. You know, you can close your eyes to the sun, but it sure doesn't make it disappear.
And when we build this evidence up in scale, the sheer weight of the design argument is staggering. Think about it. We go from step 1, a microscopic 9,000 RPM molecular motor called ATP synthase spinning inside our cells, up to step 2, the 3.2 billion letter code of our DNA clearly pointing to an author, all the way to step 3, the cosmological fine-tuning of the entire universe. Every single level of reality is stamped with that exact same signature of intention.
Nursi basically leaves his readers with one simple, direct mandate. Raise your heads from the swamp of blind chance and just look up. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought today, based entirely on the century-spanning evidence we've explored in this text. When you look at the cosmos, do you see a random accident, or does every single atom and star bear witness to a deliberate, unified masterpiece? Think about that and keep exploring.